Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good evening, everyone. Today we are very blessed to. It's a Friday, by the way, so it's salam Jumaat to all who are here. Basically, as Muslims, Friday we go to the mosque, so it's our Friday prayers as well. So in the US, brother Michael Salahuddin, also known as Salahuddin, is going to the mosque later. So who is brother Michael? We call him Michael, so it's easy since his label is there. Michael Decero. Michael Decero. Did I say Decero correctly?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Alhamdulillah. So he is of Italian descent, Sicilian, and but he's an American, living all the way in Philadelphia. At the age of 18, he entered the Catholic Carmelite monastery, where he studied, lived as a monk, and studied to be a priest. So I'm not sure when he's going to be a priest after that duration. Maybe he'll share more about it later. And afterwards, when if he decides to, what happened is he decided to look deeper into Islam somewhere along the way, and that's why he decided to choose to embrace Islam. Yeah. So that is a brief of his introduction, but I'll leave it to him to share more about himself. But before we proceed to that, just to give you an outline of today and the weeks ahead, today will just be mainly about his story, how he came to Islam, and in the weeks ahead, brother Salahuddin will also, or Michael, yeah, he will also share more about the Bible, and where during his journey of researching about Islam did he come to see if Jesus was God in the Bible, the questions of whether Jesus is God, and many other things, where he said also that you can also find um, prophecy about the coming of the last prophet, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that will be covered in the later weeks. So today we are just mainly interested in his story, and inshallah we'll see him every Friday to share more. Okay, so without much further ado, I'll leave it to brother Michael here, who is also known as Salahuddin, to share his story. So thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, brother Michael. Thanks for coming on live today with us, and please share with us, what is the journey like? How did you come to Islam?
Well, first off, I want to say thank you, Harold, for inviting me on this show. I always enjoy talking about my past. I try to forget me nowadays, and focus more on Allah and the Ummah. But, with my story, Allah guided me, and I feel like it's a part of my responsibility to, give what I've gone through and how I came to Islam from my past. So, again, thank you. So, well, to begin, I was born in a Roman Catholic family. My family is Sicilian descent. My father is off the boat, Sicily. My mother's parents are off the boat, Sicily. We grew up in South Philadelphia, very Italian immigrant Catholic family setting, where the population, maybe 90%, Sicilians and Italians. So we grew up, like any other American Catholics in this world today, at least here in America. Most of them, like myself, I grew up. My parents didn't really go to church. Count on one hand the times that we went. I was baptized according to the Roman Catholic Western Rite. I did go through the first Holy Communion, had confirmation, and I went through all the sacraments. So, like I said, about maybe 5 times max, I can actually count that we went to church. The only two that I remember from my youth until now that were firm Catholics and really, like took the faith of Catholicism and Christianity seriously was my grandmother and my great grandmother, who's about to be 98. So yeah, they are probably the only two in both sides of my family. So growing up, I had a good childhood. You know, we weren't wealthy, we weren't poor, we were, middle class. Um, of course, as I said, growing up ignorant of Christianity altogether, besides the major sacraments that I went through. But as I got older, um, into my early teens, let's just say like 12, 13, I, went into high school and started to turn my life into seeking things of the dunya. Here in America, it's actually quite common these days for youth to, you know, live party lifestyles and engage in things that are haram by Islam. But to me, I wasn't thinking about Islam or anything. But I lived a very dunya lifestyle filled with all kinds of sins, which I'm not going to disclose, but I'm sure you can fill in the blanks.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
The seven,
Uh,
the vices, all that is listed probably in the
well,
Bible too.
the way that the way that I see it is the reason that I believe that I kind of dove into that was
Hmm.
because I when you're not feeling yourself as even as a young kid, as a youth, a toddler, when you're an early teenager, and you're not feeling, you don't have anything positive in your life, which I really didn't. Not that my life was all not good and it was garbage, but I definitely, when whether you're an older person, I believe this, an older person, you're an adult, teenager, youth, a toddler, whatever. If you're not building a relationship with God at that point, you know, you have nothing to lose. So I kind of grew up with, I believe, no conscience. I didn't think I had nothing to stop me as a youth from believing that thinking something was right or wrong. I didn't. I mean, even at that age, I didn't believe in hell. I had no conception of hell. I didn't believe in heaven. I had no conception of heaven, and I had no conception of God. So, like any person of any age, especially when you're a teenager, a young teenager, and you're very influenced by your friends and more than your family, at least here in America, that tends to be the way that a lot of the youth are these days. You know, your family takes precedence over your friends take precedence over your real family. Your friends become more like your family. But so I started to, from the age of 12, 13, go into, things that I should not have been indulging in, which I did every day, every weekend. You know, as I said, it was a partying lifestyle filled with women and all kinds of other things. And from 12 to maybe 17 and a half, I lived this life. Dropped out of high school in the ninth grade. Um, completely gave up on school. I got a full time job. Um, my dad, my mom and dad didn't want me to quit school, but, uh, I just, like I said, I could care less what they thought at that age. So, because I was cared more about, hanging out with my friends and doing things that are impermissible and shameful. So, but I got to a point around 17 where I would say it was like my first rational, logical thought where I never had this thought before, but I wanted to, change. Um, I wasn't change meaning I didn't want to live that life anymore, but I found it hard to give up, because it not only the substances, not only the party and stuff, but the lifestyle, you know,
Mhm.
and to also give up my friends because I knew for me that to give up my friends would be a sacrifice. Because, like I said, up until that point, they were my family, or at least I considered them. So it'd be like giving up everything I knew. So, but it was the first time 17, thought to myself, I want to change the way that I'm doing this. I want to change the way that I'm thinking. Um, but I didn't know how. So I continued for another 5 to 6 months of just hopeless, hopeless, helpless, um, not knowing what to do. Then at 17 and a half, I got to a point of desperation in my life where I was beat down enough by the life I was living, and I just was ready to give up that stuff and give up that life and give up, you know, being an agnostic. Because even in my teenage years, I was a atheist. I had come to the conclusion in my brain there is no God, because I saw a lot of suffering around me, and because of that suffering, uh, I just completely rejected God. You know, I didn't know God. I would never in those days say if I did believe God, there was a God, that he was Jesus, Allah. I just had no concept of God. So at 17 and a half, as I said, it was my first commitment ever to give up that lifestyle. And I was still looking for a way out though, because it's hard. You know, I found it very difficult, give up
How,
everything and just be alone.
I got a question though. How is it that, I mean, you went for catechism classes too, right? And afterwards you go for your first Holy Communion and confirmation as well. Um, how is it from a very, sort of routine religious life? Did you start to lose faith to become an atheist? How did that happen?
Well, even after
Yeah.
catechism classes, my first
Mm.
Holy Communion, I remember I didn't even want to do them. Like I remember fighting with my parents about this. Around 7, which is usually the age people receive first Holy Communion. So, I mean, even then, it was more of a forced kind of thing that I was not willfully entertaining. I mean, I almost got thrown out of that thing 2 times because one time I walked out. But like I said, it's not like I was being catechized willingly, wanting to do this, believing that, and then become an atheist. I just never really had a real concept of God, even from that age. Like I could care less at that point. So
And
then it's
Jesus at the time was just Jesus was just
well,
yeah.
Jesus was somebody that people worshipped, according from what I understood, but he was not God to me.
Let's see. Okay,
But
cool.
like I said, my parents they
Mm.
were they were lapsed Catholics who rarely ever went to church. It's a typical thing, like I said, these days where people, they have their kids go through sacraments, and that's it.
Hmm.
Now there are a lot of like I'm not. Don't get me wrong. There are good Catholic families these days where people have their kids. Their parents are really righteous and want to be saints and go to the sacraments every Sunday. Some of them every day, but it's not the way. I just imitated what I saw. When you're young, you imitate what you become a product of your environment. My parents, they did believe Jesus was God at that point, but they didn't show me any reason to believe it.
Mm. Okay.
So then at 17 and a half, I've came across, I have a aunt who was very helpful. I was looking for help. I wasn't the type to ask my parents because I just wasn't what I did. I mean, I just was, even though it was something good for me to change. But so I went to my aunt, my closest aunt, and I said to her, that because she's had some problems before too, like I have, and I was asking her, what I could do, and she gave me a bunch of solutions, and then walked in. Well, what will be the one person in my life? I'm not gonna name his name, but he's the one who actually got me back, like really on fire for my faith, the Catholic faith at that point. Um, he had some similar situations in his life, and just as my aunt and I are talking, he was always our family friend. And just as he, excuse me, just as he walks in, you know, my aunt was telling him, I was looking for some help, and could he help me? And I remember right there at that moment, he told me, he's like, "Well, the only way you're ever going to be free from uh, any of these vices or sins or lifestyle is to pray." And I'm like, well, I'm not gonna lie, I've never prayed a day in my life. I mean, I never said one prayer to any God at this point. Um, Again, never saw my parents pray. Why should I pray? I never found a desire to pray. But I did say to him, well, I really don't even know how to pray. And I don't know who to pray to. Like, I didn't know who at that, like I said, at that point, I wouldn't even say that I believed Jesus was God. I just lived my life in a secular kind of party lifestyle. And I said to him, well, if I'm going to pray, I said, who's God? And he said to me, well, he said, Jesus is God. And I did laugh. I like kind of like had a chuckle. I went like, cause because you always get the holy rollers. Back then I always, holy rollers are the people who, Jesus can do everything for you. Occasionally I came across them, not my family so much, but occasionally you would see kids in school or, maybe there's some parents at school, like that. Jesus can do everything kind of thing. So I did chuckle and he did say to me, he's like, well, why? What's funny? He's like, did you ever try to ask him? I'm like, well, you got a good point. I never tried. So I said, well, I don't even know how to pray. And he's like, well, tonight when you go home, he's like, get on your knees. Because Catholics usually, when they pray, they're on their knees. Get on your knees and take a moment of silence and just be quiet. And then ask Jesus to help you and relieve you. So I said, okay. I said, I guess I'll give it a shot. But I said, if it doesn't work, I guess Jesus isn't for me, right? That's what I told him. So I went home and it was later on that night. Got on my knees and, you know, like I'm not even sure how to address him, God, Lord, but I just called him Jesus. So I did what the normal Catholics do when they pray, like I said, knees, hands in the up together in an upright position or kind of balled together, both hands together. And I asked him, to help me and
Mhm.
if he's God, to show me and
Mhm.
I to free me from that life. And I mean, I'm not gonna lie. At that moment, I kind of had. I'm not gonna say it was something mystical. It wasn't. I didn't have a vision, a locution. Uh, Nothing extraordinary happened, but I kind of walked away with a little bit of peace. And because I walked away with a little bit of peace, of course, I really believe that at that moment it was, Jesus who had given me this peace. And I left my house that night and I went through all my contraband, all my shameful substances in a trash can at a Wawa and everything, every little thing. And never and just threw them away at that moment, never came back to them. And later on, I didn't even contact, next day my friends are calling me. Of course, I had a lot of friends and, some of the women that I also dealt with, but it was hard, but I gave it all up. And from that point, I called my friend, the one that had told me to pray. I said, and I was telling him what happened, and he's like, well, I'm like, well, what do I have to do now? And he's like, well, you should go to confession. So I said, I don't even know how to confess. Last time I confessed was my first confession, which was again, right before the age of 7. And so I had no idea even, I knew what confession was. But like I said, I went one time, I was right before communion at 7.
Mhm.
So I did. So he says, well, he took me to a priest friend of his who, again, I, knew no priest, never went to a church, up until this point ever. So I went to this church and he took me to his priest friend who I told him I wanted to go to confession, but I really hadn't been since I was 7. So he says to me, well, we can walk through it. So he walked me through it, went to my confession, and I did want to go. I mean, at this point, I'm willingly going because at this point, I'm so in need and just disgusted with the way I was living. I'm, willing to try anything at this point. You could have told me God was a rock. I probably would have tried to pray to the rock at this point. That's how desperate I was to get out of it. So I did go to confession, and I felt like there was some kind of healing. Again, confession, and felt like there was some kind of healing, and not physical healing, but a spiritual healing, because that's kind of what they look at confession as. It's like a spiritual healing. So after I went to that first confession, I found myself, wanting to go to mass. So I went to it was a Saturday evening here in Philly, and again went to my second confession ever. And after confession, went to mass. And while at mass, I, again, this is my second mass ever. The last mass I remember is seven. So now I'm 17 and a half, and I'm going to mass. And so, I'm at mass, and I'm not gonna lie, I didn't find anything awkward. It was very inspiring. I found peace. I enjoyed the hymns and everything else, the homily, and I mean, I'm not gonna lie, there was some confusing parts because you wouldn't believe how ignorant I really was back then of Catholicism. You know, I really knew nothing. So, but that was Sunday, and then Monday, I wanted to go to mass again, but this time, Jim, my friend, was working, and I said, so I went by myself. Back then, I didn't have a car. My parents never let me get a license because the lifestyle that I was living, I probably wind up dead from an accident. So they were smart not to let me get my license ever. So I got on the bus Monday, Tuesday. So now I'm started going to mass every day because I'm actually like wanting to go. I'm finding some peace. I'm finding some healing, and I start going to mass every day. About 2 weeks into going to mass, excuse me, 2 weeks into going to mass, it was Saturday evening. I was hanging out with my friend, the same one who had helped me from the beginning, the one that I'm not going to name. And he said to me that evening, he's like, "Well, would you want to go to Carmel in the morning?" It was Sunday morning. He said at 7:30 in the morning. I'm like, Jim. Well, okay, I'll name his name. His name's Jim. So I said he doesn't care. I still talk to him to this day. So I'm like, Jim, why would I go to I'm thinking it's like a candy store, like Carmel's, the candies. And he's like, he said he served mass. He was an altar server there on Sunday mornings. And he said, well, he didn't tell me that at the point. He just said, you want to go to Carmel. So I said, Jim, why would I go to a candy store at 7:30 in the morning, all the way across the city? I said, no, I'm not going. Not that I don't like candy that much. So he's like, no. He's like, it's not a candy store. It's a Carmelite monastery. They call them caramels. And I'm like, a what? Like back then I couldn't even say the word monastery. It was really like it took me a while to even get a hold of that word. So I said, well, he was telling me about it, and so yeah, I went. So that Sunday morning, I went to a discalced Carmelite monastery of of hermits. Well, they're monks and hermits, and it's men. And I'm not gonna lie, it was all Latin, which was completely foreign to me. And it was all Latin. It was Gregorian chant, and he was up there serving the mass, as I said. And I sat in the back because I wanted to be an observer and see everything, even though I was back in the faith, right? And my faith is on fire right now. All I've been doing is reading and learning my faith. So, that morning as I'm sitting at Carmel, the Carmelite monastery there, I'm not gonna lie, I fell in love with it. But it was very beautiful Gregorian Latin chants and hymns. Really fell in love with the Latin. I also, you know, even though I had no clue what that priest was saying, yeah, had no idea what he was saying. But they have these hymnals that they give to people who don't understand the Latin, and so I picked up one of them and I just followed along in English, and like I said, I fell in love with it, and I started going there every single day. About 2 weeks after I'm going there, the head guy, the prior, he's in charge, the monk in charge. He said to me, oh, would you like to serve here at the monastery on Sundays? I'm like, oh. And again, I had no idea. I knew what serving was at this point, right? But I had no idea how to. So I've always had like social anxiety doing those kind of things. But I figured I'd try to, fight that and overcome that. So I did hack. I did. They taught me how to do it, and I was there every Sunday, and then it became every day, serving mass there. And then about 2 weeks after serving mass, the head prior guy, that's what they call the one in charge, the monastery prior, he said to me, he's like, would you like to, come work here? Now, the way they live is a cloistered life. Cloister is like a Catholic word. It's an ecclesiastical word that basically means cloister, enclosure, meaning those hermits and monks, they don't leave ever unless it's an emergency of death. The dentists, usually we had they had doctors come there and see them, so they never went anywhere. They went and stayed and never came out. Never went to see their families. Did none of it. So, I didn't even know people could work on the inside. Of course, men only. They don't let women work there. So I'm like, well, I can help, but I don't really, I don't really have any real work experience. I'm like, I'm not sure what you want me to do. So he says, well, just be ready on Monday. This is, of course, Sunday we're talking. He's inviting me to come work there now every day. So Monday comes and I show up and, it was cold. It was wintertime, and I'm dressed for working out in Siberia. And, I have all my, construction clothes on and my work boots ready to do some real work. And when I got back into the back on the enclosure side where the monks live and the hermits, they handed me a broom. I was a little disappointed. I was disappointed because I thought they meant like real work, lifting up some bricks or, doing something. So, but I was grateful because I really, I didn't want to lift up big logs or, do any brickwork. So I was happy he gave me a broom. So as I'm, doing this work, I'm just, of course, looking around, and it's just so, most people, they don't experience the inside of a monastery, even as a lay person, which is what they call Catholics, a lay person. People who go to aren't monks or hermits who don't live there. So the only way you can go back there is if you work there, or if you live there as a monk or a hermit. So I'm there working for a good about 4 or 5 months, and at this point, I'm like, I'm not gonna lie, I'm falling in love with him. Um, I'm meeting all these really nice monks and hermits, and one thing that I do notice is totally silent. Like they even have their own sign language. It's called monastic sign language. Monastic just means it's like a fancy word from monk sign language, because they do take silence very seriously in this monastery. So, if you see somebody, it's not actual sign language like people who can't see or hear, but it's a different sign language. It's stuff that only monks would know. It's a monk coded sign language.
How give us some examples of how is it like
Well, like, point,
yeah,
and then it'd be like, or, that this is eat.
okay.
Like, that's eat. Putting all three of your fingers together and just put them up to your mouth, or 5 minutes to eat. Things
Oh,
like this. Simple, but
okay.
it was sufficient. Like I said, it was nothing complex about it. It wasn't a very scholarly um, sign language. It was very simple. I also noticed the life of poverty that they lived. I mean, it was very poor monastery. They took their vow of poverty seriously, and then, of course, obedient. Like I said, at this point, I'm going to mass every day. I'm working there every day. So then they as I'm working there, falling in love with the life, and I'm thinking to myself, well, now I'm thinking I want to be a monk, and
Mm.
I want to be a monk, and then maybe even a priest at this point. I'm thinking to myself, and again, I'm 18 now, just turned 18, and I really was thinking about it. And I remember I didn't know how to say it to the one in charge, but it took me a while for it to come out. But I did tell him that I wanted to join them, and he's like, "Well, if you want to join, there's a process." He's like, "Of course, you know how we live here because you work here now for all these months. You see how we live, so you have an idea." And at that point, I've been very impressed with the way they live. I mean, I like the silence. I like solitude. At this point, like I said, I'm developing a life of a spiritual life of meditation and prayer and contemplation, and the works, reading all kinds of Carmel. I fell in love with Carmel. I didn't just fall in love with Jesus back then. I fell in love with the Carmelite spirituality, which is it's completely. It was a beautiful way of life that I found very attractive. So you know, so after that, and I told him this. He told me to give it a month to really think and pray. I told him I've been thinking and praying for months, but okay, I'll wait a month. So after a month, I went back to him and I said, still working there still. And I said, I really want to do this. And he's like, well, the next thing would be that all the monks and hermits, they have to meet you in the speak room. Speak room is where it's in a monastery where the monks are on one side, and there's metal bars. It looks like prison, but they're fancy bars, fancy prison bars. And
Okay.
it has veils. Not you can see through the veils, but you can't see everything clearly, but you can still see. It's supposed to protect the monk's vision, basically. It's supposed to be something that still keeps the enclosure, keeps the separation from the world. Not from the people, from the world, because that's what the monks reject, is the world
Wow.
and the life of, vanity and things like this. So I went into the speak room, and all the monks are there, about maybe 16 at that point. And I told them about, of course, I want to, enter. And they said, they're asking me why I want to enter. I told them all these reasons. So after 2 hours sitting there, for every Sunday, I was there for 2 hours with them in the speak room. It was probably about 4 Sundays in a row, 1 month, sitting and talking. Then they said, well, if you really want this, and they did believe that I could do it. They saw my sincerity, and they said, if you really want to be here, then, you know, all you have to do now is fill out an application. Like a
Like
job
a
application.
okay.
But it was a monk application. It was more of a. It wasn't really so much. Sorry,
Nice.
it wasn't really. Man, sorry. It wasn't really so much. It was more of a Catholic application, basically. So after I filled it out, they accepted me, and I joined on the feast day of the Chains of Saint Peter, which is February the 22nd. It's called the feast day of the chair. Sorry, my bad. Sorry, the chair of Saint Peter, which is too much to go into, but why that
Okay.
day? But that's the day that I entered, February
Okay.
22nd. And when I entered Carmel, you know, my mom was there, my dad was there. It's like a tradition where your family brings you, there, and they walk you to the enclosure door. It's basically the big door that only the monks use, and it goes to their side that people never go through that door. So, I'm standing there, and of course, I gave my mom and dad, farewells, because again, I'm never going to go out and see them again. That for now on, they're going to come see me. So I entered, and I just gave my farewells to my family, and my mom. My mom's always been supportive. I could do anything, be anything. My mom's always like that. My dad, he really thought I was crazy. Like it, I'm not even gonna get in. I'm not even gonna get into what he said,
Okay.
because I don't want to offend Catholic people with the words that he used.
Okay.
But yeah, he saw it as a waste of life, basically. Why
Okay.
would you ever want to do this? You're just ruining your life, and some other bad words, some
Okay.
real bad words. So but I could care less at that point because it's, I'm an adult and it's my decision. So I entered the Carmel and began to live the life of a monk.
Was the gym there too?
Yes, he was. Yep. My grandmother was there. My great grandmother, my grandfather, a lot of my
Mm.
family members were there.
Oh, okay. So they are so happy that you're going
Oh
to
yeah.
dedicate your life to Jesus at
And
that point
trust
in
me,
time.
they were all shocked, especially with the life that I lived before. So imagine, I went from that extreme, not knowing God, not believing God, cursing God, rejecting God, as a young kid and going into my teenage years, to now going into a monastery to live with monks. And these aren't just dudes; these are not like friars who are mendicants who go out and teach and preach, or your parish priest who he can go in and out the church and do whatever he wants all day. These guys are, where I lived, it was no joke. It was very strict. It was very penitential. It was very poor, very simple.
Can
Um,
can can you share us like the vows that you have to take as a monk there? And is this in Philadelphia? This monastery?
so basically, this is the way it works. So when I entered, I was what's called a postulant. The postulant stage of monastic life is 6 months, 6 months to a year. 6 months if you catch on quick, and a year if you need more time. This is the postulant stage, meaning you're not a monk yet. You're not even a novice yet. You're entering, and you're really just the new guy. Basically, it's a fancy word for, well, you're the new guy, and see if you can hang around long enough. So yes, I was a postulant there in Philly for 6 months. After the postulancy, and of course, everything there was, I'm not gonna lie, it came very easy for me. I mean, I didn't have any struggles. It was very simple. I mean, it's not that I didn't find things hard, but I guess because I worked around them all day, 10, 12 hours a day for so many months. It was kind of like, and I'm not gonna lie, like what they did all day, I did all day. I was secretly already, living their life. Like when they prayed, I prayed. Not with them though. When I was working there before I entered. Like
Mhm.
I developed my whole schedule of my day, Monday through Sunday, around their schedule, and everything they did. Even if I wasn't there, I still did everything they did, just to get used, just to see, because like I said, I really, I admired them, and they were very inspiring to me. So I'm there for 6 months, and I'm, a postulant at this point, and in Philly still. Uh, After 6 months, I enter what they call the novitiate. Novitiate is just basically it's basically 2 years. There's no extending and there's no earlier. It's a 2 year program where now you're still not official monk, but you're there and you're living. But that you're like basically a monk in training. Basically, it's like monk school. It's like hermit school. Like it's everything that you're doing at this point is learning, because it was Carmel and Carmelites. Learning Carmelite spirituality. Studying the works of Teresa of Avila, John of the Cross, Margaret Reddy, Mary Magdalene de Pazzi, Therese of Lisieux, Elijah, Elisha, studying the history of Carmel. And at this point, I also started studying to be a priest at this point. So in the monastery there, again, we don't leave to go to a school. Normally, seminary priests who go to churches on, the secular churches, the churches that you would go in and out of over there, the one that you see at your parish, right? That priest, he goes to a
Mhm.
seminary. But the way the monks and hermits are, we have our own monks that live with us that teach us theology, philosophy, Latin, Greek. At this point, I'm also studying Latin, Greek. Koine Greek, which is of course the Greek the New Testament's written in. Ecclesiastical and classical Latin, which is of course the ancient language of the Catholic Church. And so yeah, I'm definitely learning a lot at this point. Um,
Do you
so
have to
really,
learn like the Quran and everything? Do you have like religious books there besides Christian books,
no,
Catholic books?
no,
No. Oh.
no,
Okay. Yeah.
no. I mean, of course, the only thing that we're reading is Judaism books, because of course Christianity comes from mostly Judaic principles. So because the whole Bible, the Old Testament, New Testament, they work together, and you can't really read the New Testament without understanding the Old. So, like I said, at this point, I'm a novice. I'm first starting studying to be a priest. I'm learning philosophy, theology, Latin, Greek, um, and of course, Carmelite spirituality. I'm studying Carmelite history. So, my whole day at this point is between studying and prayer and some work, or labor. They have a saying in the monastery. It's called or at labor, which basically means like prayer and work. That's our life: prayer, work, and some study. So I'm not gonna lie, it was a lot of studying. It sometimes became very intense, but I never really realized how smart I was, because like I said, I quit school in the ninth grade. Imagine, I'm ninth grade, and now I'm learning 2,000-year-old Greek and Latin, and it was blowing my mind. But I was so on fire. Like, one thing that I know from experience is when you really love something and you love what you're doing, you're gonna learn it like super quick. Like that zeal, that passion for whatever it is you're trying to learn, which is what I had. Learning Greek and Latin, or learning everything that I would learn there, whether it's the priest stuff or the monk stuff, it came easy.
Mhm.
So after 2 years, I passed the novitiate, and then I could stay in Philly, but I had a desire to go out to Minnesota. There's a Carmelite hermits out there. Now I'm allowed to do this, but you can't do this unless you're actually a monk. So at this point, after the novitiate, now I'm in simple profession, which is basically, I'm a monk basically. So I'm at this point, I'm in a profession, and I'm you know where we were living, it was Philly. It was silent, solitude, but I really wanted to go and disappear, and just disappear and live the life of a hermit, Carmelites, and just be out of everywhere, be away from everything in this world, and get away and disappear. Not because I didn't like the world, but because I just, like I said, the whole life there is about solitude and silence. So then I asked the one in charge, the prior, if I could transfer out to Minnesota, which is like upstate Minnesota on the border of Canada. And it's a Carmelite hermitage out there. They were hermits. Before you become a hermit, first you have to become a monk. And most monks don't become hermits.
Okay.
Most monks, they stay monks. Monks, they live together. They live a synobitical lifestyle. It's a nice fancy word for
Mhm.
monk. People living together, living the prayer life, they eat together in the refectory, which is where we ate. It's like basically, our dining room, but we call it refectory. So we did everything together as monks here in Philly. We prayed together. We prayed the hours of divine office, lauds, matins, lauds, terce, sext, none, vespers, compline. So that was the hours of prayer that we did together every day. Every morning we had an hour together in the church, on our side, obviously, of mental prayer and silence. And then in the evening, another hour. So, but again, everything is together. Even though we don't talk, we only talk 3 days a week there, in Philly here. We had 3 hours of recreation: Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday. Tuesday was 1 hour from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Thursday was 1 hour from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Sunday we went on 3 hour walks, which was nice. Because we had big. If you saw the outside of our monastery here in Philly, we had two whole square blocks, two square blocks of look like prison walls. I mean, if you drove by this place, you would have thought it was a prison, because they were higher than prison walls. But for us, it was like a spiritual prison. But that's kind of the way we looked at it. But my whole point is back there, you never would have thought you were in Philly. You would have, because here in Philly, everything is concrete jungles, and everything is buildings and people and cars, but back there it was like a little you know, it was like a little bit of Eden. It was like a little bit of the Garden of Eden,
Mm.
trees and flowers, and we did a lot of
Got
beautiful
it.
things back there, and it was big. So on Sundays we went out for our 3 hour walk. So like I said, besides those days of talking, we took that kind of silence very serious. So for me, I was happy here, but I wanted to go to Minnesota. So when I asked the prior here in Philly if I can go to these hermits in Minnesota, the Carmelites, he says, um, "Well, I think you do good out there, but of course, if it didn't work out, because the life in Minnesota was more severe than even in Philly, he says, well, you can always come back." I said, "Okay, I'm gonna go see and try." So I went out. I They flew me out by myself to Minnesota, and I'm not gonna lie, there were 7 hermits out there. Everybody has their own little hut, and they could. It was freezing cold. It used to snow by feet out there, not by feet, like not a foot, not 6 inches. Like here in Philadelphia, it snows like 6 to 10 inches, and everything shuts down. But up there at the border of Canada in upstate Minnesota, it would literally snow by feet. There was no inches; it was feet. How many how many feet did it snow today? Well, 2. Yesterday was 12. Like there was times where we couldn't even get ourselves out of the hermitages because they were so deep as snow. There was all kinds of bears, black bears, brown bears, coyotes, wolves, and the way that we lived out in Minnesota is everybody had their own little hermitage. Hermitage is basically a miniature house, and my say for example, my little hermitage, my little house, it was like a hut. It had one room. It was maybe 18 feet long by 10 feet wide. It was not big. And that's all we had. And that's all I had. Everybody had this little small space to live and die for the rest of our lives. And I was out, of course, that had a bathroom. Also had wood stove. We used to chop down our own firewood and keep ourselves warm. We never were cold unless we went out into the cold. But as long as we didn't leave our hermitage, it wasn't too bad. Yeah, it was freezing up there. I mean, it was like -20 was normal, of
Yeah.
course, Fahrenheit. So, I go out there and I'm not gonna lie, I just fell in love with it because it was exactly what I was looking for. Um, some people think I'm crazy for ever going there, and most monks that try to go out and live there, they don't last. They come home after a month. So I was there. I was there for about 3 years before I was transferred to Rome. So
Wow.
I'm out there. I'm a hermit now. Hermit is the difference between a monk and a hermit. Like I said, monks, they live together, pray together, eat together. They don't talk too much still, but everything's together. Everything's community. The hermit comes from the from the Latin word for to be alone. That's basically what it means, to be
Wow.
alone. So my hermitage, and then the next hermit down, his might be 200 yards away, right? 200 to 300 yards away. Then the next one down from him, his is another 200 to 300 yards away, and the next one down from him is another 200 to 300 yards away. So we're nowhere near each other. Like we're all distant. So the way that we usually lived out there, we still prayed the divine liturgy over the hours. We said mass every day. I'm still studying to be a priest. Still studying philosophy. At this point, my Latin and Greek are getting really good. It's at one point it became very fluent. Like now I can read, understand, write, talk, listen to podcasts in Greek and Latin and understand everything. That's how far that they took it. So we're still
Wow.
praying. All the matins, lauds, terce, sec, non, vespers, compline. Still have, but like I said, most of it was in our own hermitage. Most of the time was just by ourselves. So now there's not too. Now we only gather to eat one meal a day. Back in Philly, we ate everything, breakfast, lunch, dinner together. But in Minnesota now we have lunch together, which they used to call dinner. The breakfast is called breakfast. Dinner is called lunch. What we call lunch now, in us out here, they call dinner, and then what we call dinner out here, they call collation or supper. So the only meal we ate together was the one was we're gonna call it lunch. We ate lunch together. It was the biggest meal amongst day. Sometimes we worked together. Sometimes we didn't work together all day. Um, again, Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday, same schedule of getting together and talking. And the only time we were all together, like I said, was mass, lunch, and three the hours of the divine office. Well, actually four. No, my bad. No, it was four. It was four. It was matins, which was usually prayed at 4 a.m. Sorry, 3:30 in the morning. We got up every day at 3:30, and we
Wow.
started our day. That's our start day. Most of us didn't. Most of our lives, we did. We only had about 5 hours of sleep. I mean, yeah, that's about it. So, 4 a.m. is matins, which is the first hour that we prayed together. Immediately after, well, not immediately, but after that, we had an hour of mental prayer, you know, meditation, reflection, contemplation, whatever you want to call it, whatever you want to do, you know. And then after that, we prayed lauds together. That's the second one, which is around 6 a.m. Immediately after lauds, we had mass in Latin. Now everything from this point is Latin because a little bit of Greek. Most of the mass and the divine office that we prayed 7 times a day was in Latin. So we're out there, and oh, that's right, in Vespers, which is prayed around 4 p.m., and then of course Compline, which is the last hour of the divine office. We also prayed together. So that was kind of our day every day that we spent together. The rest of it was by ourselves. I'm not like I said. It might sound crazy, it's sometimes when I think about it, it sounds crazy, but I found it very easy. I adjusted well, stayed there for 3 years, living the life of a hermit, and then from there, they transferred me because at this point let me think. At this point, I'm 5 years into studying to be a priest, and they had transferred me out to. Well, they asked me if they didn't say I had to go, but they asked me if I wanted to go study in Rome and Spain. So I said, well, I'm not gonna lie. I for loving the silence and solitude, I did go. I didn't even hesitate. It's like an honor to be picked. They only pick one hermit every like 5 years to go to Rome and study. So they picked me. I don't know why. I still don't know what they saw. It's crazy people. So they sent me out to Rome. Again, I was living at a Carmelite monastery there. It's called the Teresiarium, which is I was out there living, and now at this point, I actually had to go out and study, because in Rome, it's a little bit different the way they do things. But okay, so most of my day was in the actual monastery, but I did go out and actually take classes. So between Rome, sometimes I go to Spain because we were discalced Carmelite monks, and Carmelites, excuse me, the earlier Carmelites were called Caus. They were called Carmelites that wear shoes. Caus means shoes, basically. They wore shoes, and they started out in Mount Carmel in Haifa, and then there was a reform because the Caus became very lax, and they took the vow of poverty like a joke and obedience and everything else. So there was a 16th century reform called the Teresian Reform, which is the Discalced Carmelite Reform. Still Carmelites, but Discalced means shoeless Carmelites, basically, because we only wore sandals. Everywhere we went, we wore sandals with no socks. Even in Minnesota in the freezing cold, that's all we did. So I was a part of the reform, which was the stricter monks and the stricter friars and the stricter nuns, which was called the Teresian Reform. The Teresa of Avila, John of the Cross, they were the reformers. There was other ones too, but other people that were a part of it, but they're the main two. So, then from Rome, they also sent me to Spain because, of course, Teresa of Avila and John of the Cross were from Spain. The reform, and they lived in Spain, and the reform Discalced Carmelites started in Spain. So I was out there, and I love Spain because it was, I was a Carmelite, and I love Carmel. And there's not a spot in Spain I've never seen. Of course, I'm Still to this day, even as a Muslim, I'm grateful to have seen all that, everywhere they walked and talked. And I also went to some Carmelite schools there. And then from Spain, I went to France, and I was in Lisieux, which is where Saint Therese of Lisieux comes from, the little flower. I was out there for maybe 6 months. I wasn't studying there though. I just was out there for a little retreat and stayed for a little bit, and then from there back to Rome. And then when I was in Rome, pretty much for a good 2 years. And of course, like I said, studying theology. Who is Jesus? Is he God? Church history. I mean, my expert of specialties was biblical, New Testament biblical manuscripts, like the early ones in Greek and Latin. Like, looking at them, cataloging them. I mean, I love Greek and Latin. I'm not going to lie, still today. Uh, so, I was studying, that was like my specialty. That church history, especially the first 800 years after Jesus, that was another one of my expertise in studying. And then after that, and of course we learned everything, obviously. But I was also what they would call a San Juanist. Well, San Juanist, which is somebody who, because of course I had a great, you know, love in those days for John of the Cross. Because, for me, he was one of the reformers of Carmel. He was the one with Teresa of Avila, the woman, who started the Discalced Carmelite reform. And, I studied all the Carmelites, but, I specialized as what they would call a San Juanist scholar of John of the Cross, basically. That basically means that I've reached the level of knowledge of John of the Cross because he has a lot of teachings and writings in mystical poetry and everything else like that. So that was that, that was one of my specialties as well. But again, we studied everything. So then after 2 years in Rome again, back in Rome, then I came back to Philly because my mother had gotten sick with a disease, and I just I wanted to take care of her, but be closer basically. Um, and she had that disease for about 22 years, and but I still want to be closer. So this way, at least my grandmother and my grandfather could bring her to the monastery over there. So now I'm back in Philly, still doing the same, monk life and living like a hermit out here in Philly. And then, you know, I started to maybe 6 months to a year before I actually left. I started having, some doubts about, what I believed. At
Okay.
that point, I definitely was nothing but believed it. Like, really. Like, how Allah got me to become Muslim is a miracle, really.
Wait,
Because,
how long more as a Carmelite monk before you be a priest? Is there like a duration? Do you study?
well, oh, sorry. The schools that I went to, it takes
Yeah.
about 8.5, 9 years to become a priest. 4 years philosophy, 4 to 5 years theology. And the monk, like I said, that's usually would actually be a professed monk around 5 to 6 years. So at this point, I'm a monk. Like I'm a actual religious
Okay.
community member,
Yeah.
and I'm still studying to be a priest. At this point, like I said, I have about a year and a half at this point to become a priest. And up until this point, I really didn't have any doubts. But one day, at this point, I was invited to go give a lecture here in Philly at a church. I'm not going to name the church, but I still remember the name. So I was out there, giving this retreat to these, what they call third order Carmelites. People who they're part of the Carmelite order, but they don't wear habits. The brown gowns. They don't wear scapulars. They don't have the cowl, the hood on. They're lay people who are associated with Carmel and live a Carmelite life, basically. So I was there, and when I was getting out of doing this on the fourth day, I came across this person, Of course, I didn't even care to even look that way, but it was a Muslim. And this person, of course, because the way that we dressed as monks, Carmelites, was very. It was.
Obvious.
Yeah, you could definitely tell. So yeah, it was easy to.
You mean they wear the Jedi thing? Is it a Jedi?
Well, it's the no the belt is made of rope with
Oh, okay.
with the rosary hanging down.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's really complicated to explain. I mean, like a dish dasha, right? What we wear,
Yeah.
that's the habit, right? So every monk had a brown long robe, long sleeve, all the way down to his feet, and he wore no shoes and had on sandals. Very brown sandals, simple sandals, poor sandals. And then they had what would be called a scapular, which goes over your head, and it comes like it's about from here to here, and it goes all the way down the front and back, the same size, to about your shins in the front, your shins in the back. And then the hood is, they have hoods when it's really cold or something. The monks do. The nuns don't. The nuns don't have hoods. But the hood is called a cowl, COWL.
Hmm.
But that's what they called it. So that was like our outfit. So I
Okay.
ran into this Muslim who he approached me. I mean, I never would have approached him, but he said he started. Of course, he asked me if I was a priest. I said, well, I'm a Carmelite, but I'm almost finished being a priest at this point. And he's like, well, can you do me a favor? And when I saw him, he only had on a kufi. I know what a kufi looks like. I know Muslims at those days they wear kufis. But he's like, what? He's like, can you show me where Jesus says, I'm God? And I'm like, really? That's all? I'm thinking to myself, like, really? That's it? That's all you want to see? Like, I've spent my last 8.5 years studying. Like, I don't even, I got the Bible pretty much memorized in my brain, New Testament, Old Testament, in Greek, Latin, English, and a little bit of Coptic. Sorry, no, not Coptic. A little bit of Hebrew.
Hmm.
So I'm like, like, really? So, I went to, I didn't have to go looking for a Bible. So I said, well, why? I said to him, why are you trying to become a Catholic, a Christian? He's like, no, I'm just curious. I just want to know. I'm like, well, okay. So I, started quoting John 1:1 and before Abraham was, I am, Gospel of John as well. The Father and I are one. Father, glorify me with the glory we had before the creation of the world. Um, and then, some other things too in the synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, but I kept it sweet and short. And he's like, well, John 1:1, of course, is not Jesus saying he's the Word and the Word was with God and he's the Word that was God. It's John saying that that's who Jesus is. And I'm like, listen, you have to interpret this thing the right way. So he was kind of breaking down my, you know, my barriers, my arguments. But at this point, I'm still not convinced that anything he's saying is true. I just think he misreads the Bible. There's something wrong with him. And so I said to him, well, at this point, I never really. The only thing I knew about what Muslims believed up until this point was I'd heard that they believe he's a prophet. I heard they believed he was not crucified, and that it was a Messiah. But other than that, I had no idea who Jesus was for Muslims. So I did say to him, I'm like, well, who is Jesus to you? And he was telling me all about who Jesus was. And as he's going through everything, prophet, messenger, brought the Injil, born of the Virgin Mary. He's not God, he's not divine, he's not son. He wasn't crucified. There's no resurrection. Closest in the company of God. He doesn't sit next to God for Muslims, but he's closest in company to God. Only Allah knows that part, how that is, but that's what we believe. And, he's going to come back before the actual day of judgment, and he's going to make right what the Christians, of course, made wrong. You know, Jesus, did you tell, did you tell your followers to worship me, to worship you? And he'll say, no, I reject this. I never told them this. So when I heard that, I walked away wanting to. I did get his number, and I wanted to, convert him, basically. So I'm thinking, well, because I know from apologetics is just apologetics is basically a Christian way of saying, you know, talking to people who are not Christians, who are not Catholics, right? Teaching them the faith, showing them how, Jesus is God, the crucifixion, why there's the resurrection, how Jesus is the Son of God, the Trinity, all this stuff. So I did get his number, and now I'm kind of committed to, I'm not gonna lie, I was really committed to showing him he's wrong. I'm gonna convert him now. That's my mission. So I did go back to the monastery, and I'd asked the prior if I could buy a Quran. He's like, well, why would you want a Quran? I'm like, well, I was talking about this Muslim dude I just ran into.
Okay.
I just want to, I just want to, get a Quran, because I know if you want to know your enemy, you have to know what your enemy believes, right? Whether it's a Muslim, a Catholic, a Buddhist, whatever, Yet if you don't know what that other person and their faith actually teaches, how are you going to convert them, right? So I'm not going to, next time I talk to this guy, I'm not going to be talking to him ignorant, because I was ignorant of Islam, and I didn't really know how to refute this book, the Quran. Nothing. The only thing I was ever taught about Islam, for me, is they believe from monastery point. I was always taught they believe in one God. They're of the Abrahamic faith, of the three monotheistic faiths, the Jews, the Christians, and the Muslims. This is from what I was taught from, my days studying. But false book, false religion, false prophet, period. We didn't really get into any details about what they believe or why they believe it or anything. So now it's my mission to, prove this guy, to show him, oh yeah, I know a little. I'm going to disprove what you believe in now and try to do this to you and try to get you over to my side. So, I did get the Quran, and I started to read it. And when I started to read it, I started from beginning to end like any other book, So when I began to read it, I was very touched by the words that I was reading, of course, with an English translation. I still wasn't convinced Islam was the truth. So as I'm reading the Quran to look for errors, and as I'm also now at this point, I'm listening to Ahmed Didat just to get an idea of how, again, that's the way I am. If you want to, conquer a country, you have to know which country you're going to conquer and what the weakness is, right? That's
so the Muslims' position of what they believe in, what's their point of where they are going to say, this is not true and stuff. So you want to know exactly where it is so you can refute them.
So I started listening to Ahmed Didat, yes. I started listening to Ahmed Didat. I'm reading the Quran, and I'm, preparing myself for our next battle. And again, he gave me his phone number and everything, and I told him I'd definitely be calling him. But he might have to come see me. I'm not sure if I can get out. So I like I said, I'm reading the Quran, listening to Ahmed Didat, and the arguments of Islam against Christianity, the words of Allah in the book of the Quran started to convert me, and I found myself I found myself wanting very small want, like a seed, like literally a mustard seed want. Mustard seeds are tiny, like a mustard seed of well, I want to know more about this the right way, but at the same time, I'm not ready to give up, you know, 8.5 years in a monastery. It's my life, man. This is everything I know. But, starting from zero, and when I become Muslim, right, I'm a nobody. Nobody knows me. Like I'm educated right now. And it's not about just education; it's about truth. But like I have 4 or 5 PhDs in my, that have been taught to me in this brain. And I know ancient Latin and Greek, and was learning Hebrew in the last days, and it was everything I knew. These monks were nothing but good to me. I never left the Catholic faith because of any monk, hermit, or priest. I'm a truth seeker, like so long. So basically, going back to that, coming off a tangent there for a minute. So as I'm reading the Quran and trying to look for ways to counter these Ahmadiyya arguments on YouTube, again, I started to have my own heart touched by the argument that Jesus really might not be God, or what is, I've always, when I really asked myself at a certain point, why do I believe Jesus is God? Or why do I believe Jesus died on the cross for my sins? Or why was he risen from the dead? Why did I believe it? I mean, when I, like I said, let's go back to what I said in the beginning when we started. When I became practicing zeal Catholic with the help of my friend, right? When I went back to that, when I asked him who God was, like I said, he could have just said anything. I was just desperate. So I never, from that point until this point now in the story, I never really thought, why do I believe he's God? Besides, I was desperate, and that's just who I chose to be my God. But okay, it was a choice of desperation for me. But I never really went deep into, is that actually what I believe? So, again, I'm reading the Quran and listening to these Ahmadiyya things and getting more, not doubts of my faith, just, okay, reading it and studying this stuff at this point is not bringing me doubts, but it's making a desire for me to learn Islam a little bit. Like a good way, not just I'm going to conquer, I'm going to win this guy over and bring him to the church, and have him baptized. At this point, it's not that anymore. I'm just wanting to learn. I'm still Catholic. I'm having some issues with my own faith, but I'm just want to know Islam a little bit more now. So I actually was able to get some copies. No, I'm sorry. That's before. Still reading the Quran, and I start to, I guess, I always thought that the deeper you go into studying things like the Trinity or divinity of Jesus or his sonship, the more you would understand. But it's the opposite from my experience. The more I went into studying the Trinity, theology of the Trinity, great works like the Summa Theologica, Thomas Aquinas's great Summa on theology and the sacraments and Trinity and divinity and sonship, and of course we read a lot of those in English and Latin. Or St. Augustine's writing on the Trinity, he wrote a beautiful, well, what I used to think was beautiful, expose about the theology of the Trinity or the history and development of the Trinity. It still left me just more, the more that I studied, the more confused I was. And the more that I went into the Quran, at this point I had read the Quran maybe cover to cover, maybe 5, 6 times. Again, I had a lot of free time. And I'm still listening to Ahmadiyya stuff. So at this point, I felt kind of guilty, and I guess the word would be like, I don't know, I guess shame, guilt, because I'm living in a monastery and now I'm kind of doubting my faith, right? And I'm almost ready to be a priest in a year, monk, living in Minnesota, that, wild man life with big old beards. I used to have a beard down to like to our belts. We part of our rule that we never cut the beards; they just grew. I knew a monk. He was 90 something years old. He had his beard down to his feet, literally feet. It was just part of the way we lived. So, but my point is I'm at a point in my life now where I'm not, you know, I'm not going to lie to myself and lie to people. And I'm having a lot of, intellectual debate. One side of my brain saying, well, I think it's kind of unfair to me. And I had been praying, to, of course, Jesus, to give me some strength and to overcome this. But after about 5 to 6 months, I really came to the point where I wasn't comfortable living that life anymore in the monastery. Not because I was set on being Muslim, just because I would feel like like I'm living a lie, basically. Like that's how I felt. I felt like I was living a lie if I stayed. So I left. And trust me, people weren't okay. I could always go back. That was made clear by the prior there. But I left and went out into the world, and you know, still going through this battle in my mind. It was really like it was a war in my mind. Like you can have no idea how, because like I said, it's everything I knew. It was not just about Islam or Christianity or the Catholicism. This is my life. I'm giving up everything, everything. And so when I did leave for what they call a sabbatical is basically if you're struggling with your faith or you get sick, it's a real thing. It's like priest sabbaticals, monks, hermits, nuns, friars. So a sabbatical is like a 6 month period where you're allowed to leave, go take a break, relax. You don't have to go anywhere. You could just, I mean, of course, you're not in the monastery, you're not in the church. You're just figuring stuff out, or you're healing from illness. So I had to take like a mental sabbatical at this point. That's what I called it, because just to think about stuff. So in those 6 months, I'm still building arguments for against Islam, but then I called that guy. Uh, his name is. And then I called the Muslim brother that I ran into. A little bit of me wanting to know more about what Islam was, but at the same time, kind of hesitant to go because, again, I knew the consequences of leaving everything I knew, and like all that wasted education, like really. So I went to go see him. We sat down, and I was telling him how I was feeling about things in detail, and he took me to the imam, the sheikh. I'm not going to give his name. I've never asked him if he wants me to, but I went to the sheikh over at the local masjid where I didn't know this word. I just said I just called it wherever you guys go to pray. That's all I knew at that point. I didn't know what a mosque was. I didn't even know the word mosque. I had ignorance, just like when I first accepted Catholicism again. When I was on fire, I was like a baby learning. So I went to sit down with this the imam, the leader at the mosque. I was, of course, we were talking, and of course, I was telling them what I was going through, and I'm on a little sabbatical, and I want to know more about Islam, but I'm not guaranteed to become Muslim. Like that's what I told him. I'm just on a break. I just here to find out what you believe. And he went through all the different things about what they believe, about what we believe about Jesus, and the Trinity, Tawheed, uh, Prophet Muhammad, Hadith, Tafsir, the Sirah. He went through a lot of beautiful stories and scientific miracles in the Quran and all kinds of everything. From the 5 pillars of Islam and everything down. I mean, of course, he didn't go through every little detail, but he went pretty deep. So him and I, we started meeting like every 3 to 4 days a week, and when I first went, like I said, I was very hesitant. But after about a week of being there, I was very happy to see him. And I was still reading the Quran. I wasn't watching Ahmadiyyat stuff anymore, looking for reasons to convert him or anybody. But he had given me some books. I mean, he gave me like the first volume of, actually, while I'm reading the Quran, he also gave me the Sirah, Prophet Muhammad, um, which I found very fascinating. And I really was inspired by it. And then he gave me a little intro to like Hadith, things on the angels, and because I've always had like I'm an intellectual, and I love to read. I still love to read from the first time that I went to Carmel, uh, to the Carmelite monastery, even when I first accepted Islam until now. Like that's my passion. I'd rather read a book than go watch some TV. So, and of course, as I had questions about things in the Quran, he explained it. As I had questions about the Sirah, he explained it. Now he gave me the first volume of Sahih Bukhari, the authentic Hadith, and he's explaining it. Any kind of questions I have. So I'm not gonna lie, the Quran and the life of Prophet Muhammad both, drew me to Islam. Like they were very inspiring. But for me, I had to, and don't take this the wrong way, it's just my experience. But for me, going to Islam, like the life of Prophet Muhammad and his seerah, and going through his sayings and the way he lived and the hadith and what he said, what he didn't say, what he did, what he didn't do, what he taught, what he didn't teach. Like that really like pushed me over the hump. Like the Quran got me up the mountain. But I didn't want to go back. I didn't want to go all the way over the mountain. Christianity, my monk hermit life's on one side and Islam's on the other. Well, the Quran got me up about halfway, got me to about the middle of the tipping point, of the peak of this mountain. And it was a big mountain. It was a very big mountain. But the other half, I was hesitant. I wasn't sure I wanted to go all the way down there to Islam. But the Sirah and the Hadith of Rasulullah, I really pushed me down. And I realized very quickly that not because Muslims were telling me, not because this Imam was telling me, not because any reason except one reason. Me. I wanted to figure this out. Just like I wanted to, learn about my Catholic faith. I wanted to go to be a monk. I wanted to study to be a priest and everything. Go to Minnesota, be a hermit, go to Rome, Spain, France, back to Rome, back to Spain, back to America. And I'm not going to ask. I told myself at this point, right? I'm not going to ask the monks what they think. Or at this point, I even stopped asking the imam. Because at this point, I just wanted to find out for me. Because for me, this is me leaving that life. This is me becoming Muslim. This is me rejecting the Trinity. This is me accepting Tawheed. If it's going to be anybody, and if any voice counts, it's mine. I care less at this point what the imam says or what the Catholic priest or the monk or the prior at our monastery thought. Like I wanted to, in my brain, intellectually, go through the Quran and everything else, the Hadith, go through the Bible, go through the Old Testament, and figure out what I believe. And when I was done, I realized that I did this for about 3 to 4 months of silence between the imam and the monks. And after about 3 to 4 months of really going into detailed kind of study, as hard as it was, because it was hard. I mean, at this point I knew Islam was the truth, but again, I wasn't ready to just give up my life. Like in my life that I came from, I was like, people. I mean, it's not that it was all about what people thought, but I was respected. I'll put it like that. I was respected. I had a lot of respect, and I loved what I did. I just didn't believe what I believed anymore. And I still sometimes go and see these monks, here in Philly. I sometimes go see them up in Minnesota. I've been back many times. After I said, it's one of the most amazing experiences for me. So after, like I said, after 3-4 months, I went back to the imam, and well, actually, sorry. First, I went to the um, the monks to go disappoint them. And when I went back and I was sitting with them in the monastery, and I told them, what I did in more detail, and why I can't believe Jesus is God anymore, or why I can't, believe he actually died on the cross, or why this, why that, anything else, and why I do believe that now Islam is the truth for me. Why I do believe that Prophet Muhammad is a long line of messengers and prophets, and he is the last. And how I came to that conclusion. And believe it or not, they were not mad. They really, I mean, of course, they told me I'm in error. That's not right. I mean, they were very clear, the monks, about this, that I shouldn't go that way. I should be careful. But, they were very humble men. And they really just, like I said, they said, well, maybe you'll go become Muslim and come back. And at some point, maybe this is, what is that word? Maybe this is a
Test or
phase.
intervention.
A phase.
A face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They said maybe you're going through a phase and you'll be back. And I could have went back. If I was Muslim for 3 months, I could have went back and been like nothing. But I was really convinced it wasn't a phase. And so I gave them all a nice embrace and let them go on their way. And then when I went to the imam, I was telling them about what happened, and that I just told the monks that I was living with, this feel like it's just not me anymore. I gave them all the reasons, and that I wanted to become Muslim. And right there, I accepted. Right there, accepted Islam, and made my shahada. And then,
Wow.
the imam there and two brothers, they taught me how to make a rule, and I told myself that I'd do the exact same thing that I did when I was on fire for my Catholic faith, right? At 17 and a half. Like I told myself I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna just do nothing but study. Like that's all I wanted to do. I wanted to know more about Islam now than I ever knew about Christianity. It's kind of hard to do, but inshallah, little by little. But I accepted Islam, and alhamdulillah, no regrets. No regrets to this day. It's the best thing I've ever done in my life. And just as Brother Harold told you, of course, I'll be giving more of the reasons why, from I don't believe Jesus was God anymore, why his resurrection, his sonship, there is the every Friday. So that's because it's just too much to go into in 1 hour or an hour and a half to go through everything with my story.
Sorry, brother. We
Yep.
lost you just for 2 minutes like that. Could you just rewind like two sentences before we lost the signal?
Okay. Yep. So the reason I couldn't get into too much detail about where the proofs for me in my own study of, like I said, looking at the Bible and the Quran and the life of Prophet Muhammad, as you probably heard, I didn't really quote too much about Bible or Old Testament, New Testament, Quran, or things I read in the Sirah or Hadith. But that's why we're having it's too much to go into an hour. This was supposed to be an hour. It's been an hour and a half, and it's way too much to pack into, one episode. That's why we're going to be having soon why Jesus isn't God is according to how I came to believe that. That's my experience. Or, the crucifixion, the resurrection is from my own experience. Or sonship from my experience. Trinity versus Tawheed from my experience.
Yeah.
So that's future episodes.
Yeah, inshallah. And you guys, if you also want, you can look for his books on Amazon. Yeah, he's coming out with even crucifixion, fact fiction. Yeah.
Yes. I have three books right now. Jesus in the Bible and the Quran. Muhammad, a prophet in the Bible. Did Jesus say I am God? That's my favorite one. I really love to write that one. I just literally went from the New Testament, from book 1, chapter 1 to the end. with breaking down verse by verse which verse, well, not all the verses, but which ones actually are proof and why. And it's not
Wow.
just like, oh, because of this. It's more detailed. I enjoyed that one. And then of course I have a new one coming out soon. Right now it's in editing, Crucifixion Factor Fiction. And then inshallah after that my next one is going to be Tawheed versus Trinity. That's I've always wanted to do something on this.
MashaAllah. So beautiful to hear your story, brother. I mean, in summary, just a quick one. You started out raised as a Catholic. You didn't know much about Catholicism, but the only time you knew about it was probably 7 years old when you go to church and have your first Holy Communion and did your first confession, and afterwards you just went all the way living life only once, the kind of YOLO life. You only live once, and life of party and what most teens do, even for myself at that time, I guess. And afterwards, you know, got tired of it, and you look for some help, and finally you met a friend of yours, who asked you to pray and to look for Jesus, and that brought you to the church and slowly to the monastery, where you discovered more about the life of a monk, which is really humbling and away from the physical world, a life that of solitude. And you got even further than that. You became a hermit, travel all the way to Minnesota, snow deep, high of snow, and lots of alone time. And you say that you only could only speak like 3 times in a week, and you could only gather for a meal with your other monk buddies, like uh, very rarely. Is it? It's like something like that. And
Yep.
you could, and afterwards you go to Rome, studied more for another 2 years there, and really study even Latin and Greek and everything, and all the other basically Christianity. Is that correct? I think, did I get all that
Yep.
part right?
You're good.
Yeah. Yeah.
You got a
And
good memory.
after
Hour and a half.
after all that, yeah, you went back to Philly to see your mom because your mom is not feeling that good, and you wanted to just be closer to her, and you went to a church to also to teach, and you met a Muslim, and who asked you a simple question, which is, where in the Bible did Jesus actually say he's God? Did Jesus actually say he's God? And that got you to really start questioning a lot about what you were taught, what you actually believe in, and came to this conclusion that it's not what you really believe in, the church, what they taught you. And you started to go on a mental breakdown for a while, a sabbatical. And that's where you really ask yourself the question, what do I believe in? And came to the conclusion that it's Islam. And therefore took your Shahada and peacefully left the monastery. I think that's a beautiful story, and it's so amazing how Allah actually gave you Hidayah, guide you through all these years. I mean, spending 8.5 years in a monastery, I don't think I can ever live that kind of life. I mean, it's a hermit life,
No.
and you know,
They
completely
don't even
cut
they don't even
yourself.
have that. Even in today's world, at least in America and Europe, they don't have too many vocations. People who go and join nowadays. It's very,
Yeah,
very. It's becoming like a 1,000-year-old medieval time thing these days. Vocation
yeah.
crisis.
Yeah. People call it like midlife crisis, when you go through a career for a long time and then say, no, I'm going to change my career. Something like that. But for you, it's a lot more extreme, I would think. Like eight
Oh
and a
yeah.
half years. Yeah. And you're almost going to be a priest in the next like a year and a half or something. And
Yep,
that,
a year.
yeah. And all it takes is just one question, and to check up the Quran, to watch some Ahmad Didat, to look for the right person to teach you, the sheikh who your Muslim friend invited you to meet him, and to ask all your questions, and afterwards come to a conclusion on your own. That, I think, that's just fitra, they call it, the fitra that is speaking to you directly, that Allah has given all of us to know, and to truly know who He is. and it only takes our energy and time to really go and find out about it. Yeah, I think it's beautiful, your story, and I look forward again to the next few topics, because I myself raised a Catholic, so these things interest me a lot. Yeah, probably because we
There's
relate a lot.
there's nothing interesting about me.
Yeah. So I think I won't hold you back, and I think there's a lot of questions probably also on the comments, but I think we don't have much time to go through them as well. Sorry, I can't really see clearly because
Yeah,
I
I'm on my way
actually.
to go pray Juma.
Yeah, so guys, just leave your questions on the comments. I think brother Salahuddin can answer them if he has
Next
time.
time they can
Yeah.
next Friday. It's fine.
Yeah. Can ask him those questions. He can answer them in the next topic before we move on. And have a blessed Friday, brother. And I wish
For
you
having me.
a beautiful weekend. And looking forward again to see you in the next Friday at 10 o'clock Singapore time, via 10 p.m. and USA 10 a.m. Inshallah. And to
Inshallah.
everyone else, thanks for joining us. Hope you have benefited uh, this sharing. And jazakallahu khairan. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.